Hello, good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're tuning in from. And welcome to another episode of the Heart Centered live broadcast, where we talk about everything related to living and leading from the heart. Today, we have with us Drema Drudge, who is the author of Victorine, a novel that tells the story of Victorine Meurent, who was a model for Manet, who also had aspirations to be a painter herself. And so she's the author of Victorian. She's working on her second book, and we are really excited to have her with us here in the studio to talk about combining different passions. So welcome, Drema.
Thank you, Alina. I am just so happy to be here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you. We're really glad to have you here. Why don't we jump right in and have you talk to us about Victorian and what inspired you to write the book?
Sure. So I had always loved art, but I wasn't an art, history major or anything, but I was in a class that combined literature and art. And our professor was putting up slides of different paintings. And this painting just really caught my attention. It was Victorine Meurent, the model, posing as Edouard Manet's Olympia. And I don't know, I just felt like she had so much to say. And I just it grew out of just that fascination and wanting to know more about her.
Mm-hmm. So you wrote the book on a tour, right? Across Europe.
Well, yeah, so sort of in fits and spurts, I would say. So I was in a master's program with Spalding University, getting my MFA in creative writing through them. And so the way that program works is you get together 2 weeks in the summer, and I took the abroad portion, which means which means you can go wherever they're going for 2 weeks, and then you work with your mentor after that. For the semester. And so I actually got to see then this painting in person, and it even just hit me even harder. And I knew for sure then was like, okay, I have to write about this. And so then in my subsequent residencies and of course at home, and then my husband did some traveling to China for work. And so I wrote about it there. So I always say this book was written in like at least 6 countries. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's really amazing. So when you were writing the book and you were enrolled in this part of the program, you did not have a background in art history yet at this point, correct?
Correct. Yeah, an interest for sure, but I didn't have a history. I hadn't taken classes or anything at that point.
And what led to you? What led to that interest?
I just think, people are either auditory. My husband is very auditory. He loves music, which I like music too. Or I think they're visual. There are the different senses that sort of take upper hand in people's lives. And for me, that's always been visual. And then the more I became exposed to art, the more I just felt very drawn to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've heard about Stendls Syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, it's I would say a quite well-known syndrome where people actually, in the presence of art, develop palpitations and nervousness and anxiety, and you have that.
I do. Yes, and it wasn't until I was probably in my early 20s when I first was able to go to what I call a real art museum.
Mm-hmm.
So I was standing in front of a painting and this happened to me. And then it's happened more than once. Just, they feeling very jittery, anxious, nervous, about to faint. And my husband had to catch me and that sort of thing. And I just thought there must be something really wrong with me. And I was kind of embarrassed about it. And then somehow I ran across a mention of it. And I was like, oh, this is a real thing, and I'm not strange. It's just who I am.
Yeah. And that interest in art history, and then combining that with your passion for writing, which led to Victorian, and you have a new book coming out as well.
I'm about finished with the draft of it, so I'm looking for a home for it.
Yeah. And that should be out this year, you think, or maybe early next year?
It's hard to know right now with the publishing climate the way it is. It's hard to say, but I would be thrilled if it were out next year. That would be great.
Yeah. So, a lot of people who tune into this channel tend to be professionals who, have a lot of varied passions, but somehow those passions tend to be buried under this institutionalized, career, so a lot of doctors, lawyers. How would you encourage them to pursue a passion that's calling them? And you obviously have managed to merge your different passions in art history and in writing so beautifully. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I would say they're in a very enviable position because, as someone who was just sort of new to art history, I had to do so much research. But if you're someone if in particular you want to write about what you're already doing, whether you're an attorney or a doctor or what have you, you have the research, in your head, in your life experience, and it would be very easy just to, if you're wanting to write a novel, of course, fictionalize it, which would make it a little easier as far as not worried about permission or what have you. But then nonfiction, even, I mean, you have probably people who have, strong careers in other fields have ready-made books in their head that they could, nonfiction books that they could help people and put out there and get their name out.
Mm-hmm. So is it just a matter of recognizing that passion and then sitting down and writing the book?
Yeah, so I would say as a first step, I would look at what a person reads, So if I enjoy literary fiction, then I would start asking myself, is there a story in my life or around my life or something that interests me about what I do that I could dig up and I could start writing about? So I would start there. I would look at what I read. That really tells you obviously a lot about what your interest area is. And why write something you're not interested in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think that's a really good place to start because it's very non-threatening in that no one's asking you to write. They're just saying, just look at what you're reading, just start thinking. And then in your reading, for instance, I have a friend who has worked in pharmacology for years and years and years. She's also a writer. And she has some fascinating stories that she's not sure she's at liberty to tell yet.
Yeah.
Yes, but if she chooses to fictionalize some of those things in the future or what have you, she has things that haven't been put out yet. Mm-hmm. And so ask yourself, what is it that I like to read that I can contribute to that has not yet been put out into the world?
Yeah, that's really good. So, John Grisham is someone who comes to mind, who so nicely, he's trained as a lawyer, I think, and I think he graduated from, if I'm not wrong, the University of Mississippi Law School. And he's managed to blend his career, I guess, passion with his written with his novels. Yeah.
Yeah, he's done a fabulous job of that. Now, of course, I don't think people should feel like they have to just stay in their lane. Obviously, I feel like writing can be very freeing. And so maybe you're in a field you're not thrilled with. Well, you can use that, in your fiction or your nonfiction, or you can say, I want to explore a totally different world. And then you go from there. And again, I would say, first of all, think about what you've been reading. Start looking at your library, find books that interest you and ask yourself why, what is it about it that really intrigues you?
Yeah. I want to come back to something that really intrigued you, which was art history. And I want to invite you to tell us about your book, Victorian.
Oh, absolutely. So, as I said, I was able to see the painting Olympia by Edouard Manet in Paris, and I just felt like there were so many things that model wanted to tell us about. And I knew nothing of her, even though I had already come across the painting before I saw her in person, if you will. I knew nothing about the painting except what I had seen. And sometimes that's sort of the purest way for me to encounter art is I prefer to see it and sort of make my own impressions before I actually start researching it.
Mm-hmm.
In my research, as my husband and I are actually touring d'Orsay in France, and that's where Olympia is, we come across another painting, which is The Picnic. Luncheon on the Grass is another title for it by Manet. And this model looks very familiar. And then I realize it's Victorine again, although I don't know her name at that point. And so from there, I've come to find out she herself was a painter. And then I began to realize, I think she wants to talk to me about the fact that she was a painter, where we remember her as his model almost exclusively. And so I really thought, I want to bring forth this. I want people to know that she wasn't just a model. And I think she was a very good model. She was a model, it turns out, for many, many different painters. And all of their paintings are different. And I think part of that, different paintings of her are different. Part of that is, I think, of course, that each painter has a different style. But part of it is, I feel like she revealed different parts of herself to each of these painters. And so from there, I just became engrossed, and I just wanted people to know that she had been a painter, that her work was shown in the Paris Salon, which was the place to have your work shown 6 different times. And, they wouldn't just take anyone's work. She had to be very good.
And they even turned away Manet's work as well, didn't they?
Could you repeat that?
They turned away Manet's work, but they accepted her work.
Yes. Yeah, one of the years, exactly, yes, that they turned away his work. And I would like to think she didn't gloat, but she might have gloated just a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And I've tried to find a picture so that we can show the audience of Victorian, and I want to check with you and see if this is a picture of her. Hold on. Oh. So it's too small, huh? Let me see.
I do have a painting of her on the wall right behind me, actually. That's the first one Manet painted of her. And if you're familiar with the painting Olympia, this one is just called, Portrait of Victorine Meurent. But of course, Olympia is this full-size nude, and this is very, very different.
Yes, and that painting caused a lot of, I guess, controversy during that time, right?
Yes, exactly. Because she was so nude and she was looking out at the audience, and that was something that just was not done. It was almost as if she were condemning them for looking at her.
Yeah. I'm trying to find. I saw that picture. I'm trying to pull it up. Let me see. It's hold on. Let me get this here. Yeah, this is the one, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
The one on the far left. Yeah, and you can see why it would have caused so much controversy at that time.
Yes, exactly. But she wasn't a modest, or I should say a goddess or something like that. Yeah, this was a real flesh and blood woman, and it was indicated that she was a prostitute, or we would call her now a sex worker, of course. And that was something that you did not depict at the art salon.
and definitely not at that time, right?
Right, exactly.
So it was a story about her, and she was his model, but she also had aspirations of her own to be a painter. And
yes, and so if I may, so we didn't, until 2004, it was thought none of her work had survived. Sometimes art is just lost to history or disaster or what have you. And so in 2004, one of her paintings was rediscovered, Palm Sunday. And so I was researching her in, from 2012 on. So I knew there was one painting of hers, and I felt very excited because I felt like, well, I'll know all that I pretty much need to know about her through this one painting, but boy, I would love to see the others. And then in my research, I was able to come across 3 others. And that was like so exciting because no one even knows about these barely at this point.
And I like that picture, Palm Sunday, and let me pull it up for you, for the audience.
I feel like it really shows a tender side of her. If you think about how many pictures she was painted as nude, and then you see what she painted herself. Yeah, exactly. And actually, her self-portrait, which I see on that list as well, we're pretty sure it's on the back cover of my book, and we're pretty sure it's the first time it's ever been published. And so that's very exciting that we got permission to use that from the owner.
So who owns this painting now?
That painting of her self-portrait, well, it's owned by a private gallery owner. I'm not sure if he still has it, but the last I knew, he in Paris, and so I wish he would sell it to me for a price I could afford. I would love to put it in my house.
So this is a self-portrait.
So that would be this one. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. It's the one with the yellow dress, and there's like a little bow, sort of a black bow at the bottom. It's the third row down, second one in.
Third row. Okay, this one. Okay, that's a self-portrait. That's a self-portrait. I see. Yeah. So she paints, and so the book Victorian is about how she tries to break into the scene, I guess.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Because at that time, to be a woman painter, first of all, it wasn't really done unless you were just doing it as a hobby, or if you were painting, say, pottery for, France or something like that as a, you didn't. Yeah, exactly. And also you had to have a lot of money once the doors did start to open. It took a lot of money to become a student. And so, yeah, all through the book, she just wants to become an artist and wants to become an artist. And well, I think we know what happens probably in the end, at least. Partially.
Yeah, partially. Yeah. So it was a story that wasn't just the history of the times and how she was trying to break in. It was also a story about her, right? Who she was as a person and how she saw the world and how she looked at Manet, who was painting her. So that was great. Yeah. So, the difficult thing about doing lives is that we get interruption. And I'm trying to get my daughter started with her class. So let me try to see if I can get her started.
Not a problem.
Can you bring your laptop? Bring the computer here. Yeah. So while I'm doing this, she has a Zoom class with her with a school. So I'm trying to get her set up as well. Yeah. So I love the premise for the book. And it's such a beautiful way in which you've managed to combine art history and in a real novel. I mean, not a novel in the sense of writing about her life. Yeah. So if you could just give me 1 minute.
No problem. Take your time.
To get this in order. Hold on. Okay, I think she's all set up. So, sorry about that.
Not at all. These times you have to do what you have to do, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. So for the book, Yeah, I think it's so beautiful the way you managed to combine two separate passions, writing and your interest in art history, and make it into a novel. Um, and you know, combining both those separate passions is something that I think a lot of us want to do, but we don't really know how to. Yeah. So, what were some of the struggles that you faced writing Victorian, as your in your as try to get a novel out? I mean, that's no small feat. So, what were some of the struggles that you faced?
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't always easy, that's for sure. One of the biggest problems is because she was someone of the lower class, and because she was a woman, there really wasn't a lot known about her. And so there was a book, it was sort of a memoir slash biography put out by Eunice Lipton in the 90s. And that was really the only thing about Victorine. And so I had to dig and dig and dig. At first, I thought I would just use the paintings others had done of her, I should say, to sort of fill in those blanks. And that would have been okay. But I wanted some facts, and there were just so few to hang any facts. There just weren't that many facts available. So that was really the hardest thing, is just I kept digging and digging. And so I used as much as I could. And then I would have to look at the other artists' lives around her, because of course, this is right during the the birth of the Impressionist movement. And so we do know what was happening with art in Paris at that point because of that.
Yeah. And so the research was hard, right? Getting the information to write the book. So for people who want to write a novel and they are struggling with doing the research, what's your best advice?
Well, again, once they narrow down sort of what field they want to write, you're going to want to look at comparable books in that area to see what other people are writing. You're going to want to look for those gaps. What do you have to say that hasn't been said? Or can you say something that's already been said in a way that's more accessible, in a way that makes it clearer? And then,
I
just...
love it. I love that because that's where the value is, right? You either say something that hasn't been said before, or you say something in a way that's completely original, even though it's been said before, and that's where the value is. Yeah. So that's the first thing.
Yeah, but I mean, on a practical front, I guess what I've noticed is pretty much everyone who hears that I'm a writer says, "Oh, I want to write a book." And I think that's fabulous, because I think most people have at least one book in them, whether it be fiction or nonfiction. Some people just don't know where to start. And so actually, I have a couple of books with me today. Most people who write know these. If you don't, people should maybe consider. The first one I don't have with me, but it's called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott.
Okay, let us see if we can put it up here. So, Bird by Bird?
Yes, it's a writing instruction book, but she uses lots of anecdotes from her real life and how, she... I won't curse, of course, but there's a word for not great first drafts, she calls them. And so she really helped me to learn to get over the fear of writing. And I think a lot of first-time writers, that's what gets them, right, is that fact of, I don't know where to start, or I may write something really bad. And she says, that's it, you're going to write really bad stuff at the beginning, and that's okay. So so Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird is one I highly recommend for people to read if you think at all that you might want to be a writer. Because after your idea, that's going to be the next thing, is how do you even get started, right?
Is this correct?
M-O-T-T. Yeah, I had to think for a minute. Lamott. There we go. Yeah. And so another one is Writing Down the Bones.
Before you say that, before you go there, I think it's true that a lot of people have this fear around creativity because it makes you feel so vulnerable.
Yes.
Right. And so I love what you just said about finding the courage to actually even start the process.
I think that's one thing people underestimate. I think they don't realize the courage it really does take. I mean, because you're taking a part of yourself, something very personal, and
Yeah.
you're saying, here, even if it's fiction, it's still, there's something of you in that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's very scary at times, but you have to just say, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to see the next one?
I would love to.
This is called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg.
Writing down the bones.
Yeah, you can tell it's an older copy. I've had it forever, but it's still in print. And she's really, really good as well. She takes a more spiritual approach, I would say, to writing, but it's still, which I feel like, you know, art certainly has a spiritual component. And then
Writing
the
down.
next
I
one,
agree.
yes,
I totally agree. Yeah. There's almost like a meditative component to writing. So I don't know if you've heard of Julia Cameron's
oh yes, yes.
morning pages, and that's something you recommend.
Yes, you know, when I started writing, I did her morning pages every day for
Mm.
probably a year. And my journal entries, when I do still journal, I don't journal every day, but I journal a lot. And that's one of the things I was going to recommend people should do is journal.
Mhm.
You just get used to writing and you do those morning pages where you don't pay attention to what you write. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just sort of empty it. Exactly. So it sounds
Yeah.
like you're familiar with that.
Yeah, and it's really just a method to get your creative flow going, isn't it? It's just a matter of just getting started somewhere.
Exactly. Well, and the last one I wanted to recommend, if I could,
Yeah.
I recommend this one because he's more pop culture.
Hmm.
And it's not that I enjoy his writing so much, but this is a really good book and it's non threatening. Stephen King's On Writing. I don't know how to do this.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a very, very good writing book. He certainly, it's not that he's it's just not my genre.
Yeah.
But it's a really good book that a lot of people find very accessible. And so for
Yeah.
people who, again, are sort of scared to get started, read his book. I mean, he talks about the ups and downs and his own fear and throwing his first novel in the trash can. So
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
wife
And
did.
yeah, and I've signed up for masterclass where they actually do those teaching. They have
Yeah.
like people like Malcolm Gladwell and a few other writers. Dan Brown is there. And one of them had said the trash can is your biggest friend. It's okay, right, to
Yeah.
write uh, badly, and that's what the trash can is for.
I
Yeah,
agree. But I would also say, since most of us write on the computer, I take it out and I put it somewhere else because you never know when you'll change your mind or there might be a little bit in there you can use somewhere else. But
mhm.
yeah, take it out of that first draft and be like, okay, I'll put it over here and we'll look at it later for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Don't be
yeah.
afraid to.
Yeah, so we've kind of moved backward a little because we talked about research, doing the research first, and then we talked about getting the creative juices flowing. So kind of like once we get the creative juices flowing and we start, we get into the groove. What are some of the places that you've gone to get inspiration?
Oh my goodness. Well, definitely art museums are for me number one. And I say I get art hungry sometimes. Like
Yeah,
right now, we haven't been able to go to a museum for a few months, and I'm really kind of art hungry. Now, that doesn't
yeah,
mean, I have prints on my walls. Unfortunately, I
uh,
can't afford, but we do have a local artist. We have a piece by her, but, and I do look at prints in books, I look at computers, but also my eye now, sort of because I've trained it, I'll be outside on a walk and I'll notice like the formation of the flowers on a tree or these little pebbles, how they make a pattern, or just very something pretty, like a bird will fly by. And so
mhm.
if you train your mind and you train your heart, you can see, writing prompts everywhere you go.
Yeah, I love that part about training your heart as well. Training your eye and training your heart. And correct me if I'm wrong. I do hope to one day write a novel. I haven't yet, but is it true that the best novels are the ones that um, doesn't describe things uh, the way you see it? So rather than say he walked down to the pond, you would say he felt his feet rustle or feel the grass rustle against his feet, and so right. Is that a general advice we can go by?
Yes and no. That's the problem with most writing advice. It's both yes and no. Um, so we always try to say, show, don't tell. So we don't want to say he was angry. We want to say, he kicked the table as he went by or whatever, kicked the table leg. Um, but then there are some people, it just really depends on your style. There are times to be very restrained. Like, for instance, I'm reading Hemingway right now, A Movable Feast, which is a collection of essays that from his time in Paris. And if anyone knows Hemingway's style, it's very stripped back, very simple. He repeats things, a good, clean place. He's a man's man, and he's going to show you in his writing. So on the one hand, it depends on what your purpose is. And also, I would say the more important a scene is, the more you want to strip it back. So if you're trying to point out, this very tender moment, like this person walks to a lake and there's a leaf, that on the surface of it that makes them think, I'm going to leave my husband or whatever it may be. You'll want to make the language very simple until the moment of the leaf. And that's when you sort of put all the power and the energy in your language around it. Yeah. And so it really depends. Literary fiction, so that more depends, that more focuses on language and character development, and nothing wrong with any kind of writing whatsoever, not saying that, but then pop culture is more, or commercial is more, tell me the story.
Yeah.
And there's something very compelling about that. I wish I could do more of that myself. Because we love story as humans. We adore hearing, tell me what happened, or we'll ask our relatives, tell me about the time you whatever. And when you're hearing a story, it's not often that your mother or your grandmother is telling all of these, they don't care how you got to the pond, but they're going to tell you got to the pond. Yeah. And so that's a very long way of saying it really just depends.
Where do you learn, where would someone who is thinking of embarking on this creative journey learn the tools of the trade the way you just described? Like, that's so beautiful, the way you talked about the part about walking down to the pond with the leaf, and then focusing the power of all your words on that one instance. Where would we learn that?
I would say it really starts with reading, and reading very carefully. I'm someone, sometimes I've had to read a book that's very difficult 2 or 3 times, because the first time I'll read it to understand the story. And the second time I'll go back and I'll read it. And it's unusual for me to read a book more than twice, in a row, if you will. But if I want to see how a story is made up, or I want to understand how come I had a physical reaction, why did my eyes well up with tears, I'll go back and I'll look. Okay, so at this point, this author said this or whatever. And on the one hand, Alina, that takes a little bit of the magic away when you start breaking it down. But on the other hand, it means you have a bigger magic wand to give to other people, right?
Yeah. It's so is it just a matter of being in the craft long enough that you've mastered it? So kind of like when you were talking about that, the person I was thinking about was Dan Brown. So his stories always has this huge climatic end. And it kind of builds up, right? So is it just a matter of, is it just his style that he's built up that way, or is there certain canons of writing that people use?
Every writer is very, very different, and I admire his work, but it is one of these, it's very pace driven, right? So it's like you want to get to this clue. It's almost as if you're on like a scavenger hunt, right? You're going from thing to thing to thing. And he's interested in moving you through that story fast until you feel like you've just been on an amusement park ride. So that's very much a style.
Okay.
And in that case, I would say you would have to privilege, like, things would have to happen fast. So in literary fiction, where you slow it down, you really start exploring the characters, you start delving into their heads, you use some what we call stream of consciousness writing, where things, it's more sort of like an idea versus a whole thought. Um, you know, that has some real advantages. Some people adore that, but then some people just want you to move. And so it really just depends on what story you want to tell. I mean, there are audiences for both, but the key is, I think I kind of got away from what you were saying. The key is you're reading, reading very carefully. But what we haven't talked about is how important writing is.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you start out writing, most people aren't great at it. I look at some of my stuff and I appreciate the people in my life told me I had possibility, when looking back at it, I'm like, oh, it's so laughable.
Yeah. And it's a matter of, like you say, I think getting that courage to write.
And you have to keep doing it over and over again to get good at it. Absolutely.
I just realized that we've been getting some comments. So I guess this is from your husband. This is wonderful.
It is. Why, thank you, Mr. Drudge. I appreciate that.
An excellent set of books on writing. I agree.
It must be his lunch break.
And then, yes, reading. A great writer is usually a strong reader. Then as a writer, those things to be distilled, transformed by the writer. I love that.
He's also a writer and musician. Yes.
Yeah. So Mr. Drudge, if you're still listening, I read about you on Drema's website as well. Yeah. Yeah. So we're glad to have you here. Yeah. So my family is also tuning in. So my dad, my mom.
Great. Hello.
Yeah. So I want to invite them to comment or ask questions if they have any questions as well. Or anyone else who is tuning in to ask any questions as we go on.
I feel a little funny because I feel like I've talked so much about reading that I really haven't addressed the writing as much, but I really can't stress enough that you have to write and write again. And then I say write, revise, write, repeat. You just kind of do it over and over again. And each time you can take out something, that maybe you've used a word too often, or maybe you've used these easy little, adjectives when you need to cut some of those out, and you'll just get better and better. And as your pages start actually looking like a real story or whatever, when you feel comfortable, then it's time to bring on some of your friends, people who are who enjoy the sort of literature that you do or that you're trying to write. And then you trust them and you say, okay, would you take a look at this for me? And that can be really, really important as well.
Yeah. So have you gotten feedback from your own circle of friends and family? Did you have to hire an outside editor?
Well, because I have so recently finished my creative writing, I have a lot of friends from that still that I'm in contact with. And so either formally or informally, we've gotten together and talked about it. I try to do both people who are interested in the same vein of writing and reading that I am, and people very different to see what, reaction there might be. And so I go, okay, well then maybe somewhere in between is where I need to land,
Yeah. Writing definitely is an adventure. And the only writing I've done is with my dissertation and with scholarship and all that. So maybe one day I'll venture into this creative space. And you're right, it is very scary, because I think it's less scary to write research scholarship in a dissertation, because you're really not putting yourself out there. It's just a collection of information and your analytical contribution. By writing a novel like you have, I think that takes a lot of courage. And I love what you've done and are continuing to do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I don't know if you have talked about writing, you've talked about research, we've talked about inspiration and starting And I'm not sure if you have any comments about the publication process, or is that something that's not within your, I guess, area of expertise?
Well, I can certainly say that because my book came out March 17th of this year,
Mm-hmm.
it's been a real challenge trying to market the book.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
it's so you haven't really had much difficulty with getting it published. It's the marketing that's
Um, well, it took a little time. So, from the time I had found my agent, it took, I don't know, between 2 and 3 years to finally find a home for it. And then we found this wonderful home for it. I feel like it's in the perfect place it needs to be. And it was lovingly, taken care of, edited by them. And they would ask me questions. I got feedback, or I got input on the cover, things it's a small press. But those were some really great things, wonderful people to work with. And then it came out March 17th. And all of my book signings have been postponed, and the places I've been,
yeah.
very blessed to have people like you who've been willing to have me come, online and talk about it. And so I've been very thankful for that. But it's not a great time to launch a book, but that's okay because it doesn't have an expiration date, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. I see. So you're not able to do those book tours and the book signing and all that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge bummer. I didn't, when you said March 17th, it did not occur to me that was exactly when everything just shut down. Yeah.
It was, I mean, it's a little laughable in that it's like, that's just one of those things that what are you going to do? But we had to return to Paris, and we were going to do some readings there. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's going to be shuffled off to next year. But hopefully it'll still happen, and I'll be excited to get back there.
I wonder whether doing things virtually may, it's definitely not the same as having a book reading or a book signing. We live in Jackson, Mississippi, and there's a beautiful bookstore. It's an independent bookstore, Lemuria, and they have book signings all the time. And and I can see exactly why that would matter, because you have a group of people there who you hope would buy your book and turn into raving fans, talking to you. And so not being able to do that, that's it really is a huge bummer. But the other thing that I was wondering is something, if that's something you have considered, and whether someone in our audience who might be tuning in would think about as well, is to do it virtually, kind of like this. But have you, and maybe Barry can be with you to talk about the book. I wonder if that's something that might temporarily replace the actual book signing.
Yeah, I've done a few events. Mostly I've done a lot of like blog post, guest blog, that sort of thing. I've done a few of these. I've done a lot of podcasts. And so hopefully that is getting the word out there. One thing we're really trying to do is to get an e-version of the book. And right now we don't have that. That's hurting us a little. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it just now. But once we do, that'll make it even easier, to hopefully get the word out, and people can get in their hands really quickly that way.
Yeah. But one thing that just came to mind now that you brought it up is you could do a book reading,
Yes.
And virtually, and maybe after this broadcast we can talk about it and see if we can arrange for something. I think that would be
wow. Well, thank you. That's very generous.
Yeah, I think that would be nice to have people listen to the book, as you read it. So that's something we can talk more. But I think we're kind of like towards the end of this live broadcast. I wanted to highlight your book on Amazon. So let me pull it up. Okay, can we all see that? So that's the book. And so if there's anyone who's tuning in who might be interested, it's available on Amazon. And the way to reach Drema, and I was reading on your website that you're open to talking to people and speaking engagements and all that. So that's the way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that. Yeah, and I also do some book coaching, writing coachings for people who are starting out. I do some of that as well as I have time.
Okay. Yeah. So and I think that would be the way to reach out to you if there's anyone who wants to work with you on writing and.
Yes, absolutely.
Getting the novel out there, having the courage.
That's right. That's right.
So I guess we are at the end of our broadcast, and if you have anything more to say, any advice for the audience? I think you've given us plenty of advice, but if you have anything else.
Just keep writing. Just have the courage to do it. And I'm over on Twitter at Drema Drudge. I'm on Instagram, Drema Drudge. I'm everywhere. So I have a Facebook group, The Painted Word.
The Painted Word. Okay.
With Drema Drudge, and I that's kind of new, so I haven't done a whole lot with it. So, but I'm always eager to interact with people and to help out when I can.
The Painted Word, is that it? Hold on, let me see.
Yeah, the Painted Word Salon, actually.
The Painted Words.
Yeah.
Okay, Painted Word.
I didn't think to mention it earlier for you.
Yeah. I think this might be of interest to some people in the audience.
Yeah, good.
Well, Drema, thank you so much for being a part of this broadcast. It was a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you.
I enjoyed talking with you, and thank you so much for having me and for all that you do.
You're welcome, Drema.